Young Maid kisses a millionaire to escape an unwanted marriage. He immediately falls for her. The golden lights of the dinner table cast a soft glow on the polished mahogany surface, reflecting the subtle tension hanging thick in the air. Emma Fitzgerald could feel the weight of her family's expectations bearing down on her as she sat at the head of the table, her fingers wrapped tightly around the delicate stem of her wineglass. The gentle clink of silverware against plates filled the otherwise silent room. Her father, Henry Fitzgerald, a towering figure in the world of real estate, was speaking to Richard Hawkins across from her, his voice booming with authority as usual. "You know, Richard," Henry said, a smile tugging at his lips, "Emma and I were just discussing your vision for the expansion of Hawkins Industries. It's an exciting venture. I'm sure we'll have a great partnership." Richard, a man in his mid-30s, tall and well-groomed in a perfectly tailored suit, nodded with a practiced smile. His hair was neatly combed, and his perfectly polished shoes glinted under the chandelier. But behind his courteous demeanor, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort. There was no warmth in his smile, only a cold, calculated expression that made her stomach turn. Hawkins Industries, the family business Richard would eventually inherit, had always rubbed Emma the wrong way. Their values didn't align, and their world felt foreign to everything she was passionate about. Emma had spent her entire life surrounded by wealth, her family's sprawling estate in the Upper East Side, their private jet for business trips, even their box seats at Madison Square Garden. Yet none of these material comforts ever made her feel like she was truly alive. Every decision in her life had been calculated, controlled by the patriarch of the family, Henry Fitzgerald, and the higher powers that dictated her future. At 28, Emma had been groomed to be the perfect wife for a man who could further her father's influence, Richard Hawkins. But despite the luxury and prestige this marriage would bring, she couldn't see herself with him. Richard's ambition was narrow, his conversations shallow, and his presence suffocating. She didn't want to marry him. She didn't want to be another trophy wife. She wanted to carve out her own path, to become someone recognized for her talent and intelligence, not her family name or the wealth of her future husband. But Emma felt trapped in her family's expectations, and the idea of challenging her father's wishes seemed impossible. She had spent years following the script laid out for her: attend the right schools, earn the right degrees, and most importantly, marry the right man. And yet, no matter how much she tried to play the part, her soul felt like it was slowly suffocating. As the dinner wore on, Emma's eyes drifted toward the glass doors that led to the terrace, the cool breeze whispering through the cracks of the open window. She excused herself from the conversation, desperate for a moment of quiet. She needed space. As she made her way toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor, the sounds of laughter and polite chatter faded behind her. The night air was crisp, a contrast to the warmth of the room she had just escaped. Emma breathed deeply, her mind swirling with 100 thoughts. She knew what was expected of her. Marry Richard. Secure the future of her family's business. Play the role of the perfect daughter and wife. But was that all she was capable of? Her heart beat erratically in her chest, an unease settling deep in her stomach. She didn't want this life. She didn't want to be trapped in the gilded cage of her family's empire. She longed for more than this stifling world of corporate alliances and perfectly orchestrated appearances. But as the youngest daughter of one of New York's most influential real estate magnates, Emma knew that her personal desires would never outweigh the needs of the business empire that had been built over generations. As Emma stood at the railing of the terrace, looking out over the city's skyline, her mind wandered back to her conversation earlier with Richard. His latest business proposal felt hollow, just like every other one he'd pitched to her. She imagined their future together, a life of constant networking events, charity galas and scripted smiles. It wasn't the life she wanted, and yet it felt like she had no choice but to step into it. The faint sound of footsteps broke her train of thought. Emma turned her head and saw a man approaching, tall, with a presence that immediately caught her attention. He was impeccably dressed, but there was something different about him. His clothes didn't seem as meticulously planned as Richard's, nor did his hair look as if it had been styled to perfection. There was a rawness to him, an aura of confidence that came from experience rather than inherited wealth. It was Maxwell Knight, the CEO of Knight Technologies, a rising star in the tech industry and one of the most influential entrepreneurs of his generation. Emma had heard of him, of course. Everyone in New York had. Maxwell was a legend, a self-made billionaire who had built his empire from the ground up. His company, Knight Technologies, was at the forefront of AI and cybersecurity, and his innovations were revolutionizing industries. But despite his success, Maxwell had always kept a low profile. His life seemed deliberately private, and he rarely appeared at the high society events where the likes of Richard Hawkins thrived. "What are you doing out here?" Maxwell's voice was smooth, but there was an edge of curiosity beneath it. He had an air of confidence, a sharpness in his eyes that suggested he knew exactly what was going on in the world around him, even when he chose to remain silent. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't prepared for this encounter. Not now. Not when she was drowning in the weight of her family's expectations. "I needed some fresh air," Emma replied, her voice a little breathless. She didn't want to get into the details of her life with him. "Not yet. It's been a long night." Maxwell studied her for a moment, and then, with an almost imperceptible smile, he took a step closer. "I can tell. Something tells me you don't exactly fit in with the people inside." Emma chuckled softly, surprised at how easily he had read her. It was as though he could see through her carefully constructed persona, the one she had perfected over the years to hide her frustration, her ambition, and her fear. "No, I don't," she admitted, turning her gaze back to the city below. "I don't know if I ever will." Maxwell's eyes softened for a moment before he spoke again. "Then, why don't you stop pretending?" Emma turned to face him fully, her breath catching in her throat. Was he really asking her to stop pretending? To stop living up to everyone else's expectations and follow her own desires? The thought of it terrified her, and yet there was something freeing about it. She couldn't explain it, but she suddenly felt like she had permission to be herself, to live her own truth. "I don't know how," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Maxwell's smile deepened. "I think you do." In that instant, something shifted inside Emma. It wasn't just the tension of the night melting away, but a deep sense of connection with this man, this stranger who seemed to understand her in a way that no one else ever had. And then, in a moment of reckless spontaneity, Emma made a decision. Without thinking, she stepped closer to Maxwell and kissed him softly at first, then with more urgency as her heart raced in her chest. It wasn't planned. It wasn't calculated. It was a desperate attempt to break free from the life she had been forced into. But in that kiss, she felt something she hadn't felt in years alive. When they pulled away, Maxwell looked at her with a mixture of surprise and something else, something deeper, more intimate. The city lights twinkled behind him, and in that moment, Emma realized that everything had just changed. The world around Emma seemed to slow down after that kiss. Maxwell's lips, so soft and unexpected, lingered on hers for just a moment longer than she had anticipated, sending an electric jolt of realization through her entire body. She pulled back, her pulse racing, her breath shallow. It was as though the brief touch had opened something deep within her, a door she didn't know existed, one that had been sealed shut for years, kept under lock and key by her father's strict plans, Richard's coldness, and her own need to conform. Maxwell, for his part, stood still, his expression unreadable. The night air seemed to thicken between them as the weight of the moment settled. He didn't move, didn't speak immediately. The city's lights below them flickered like a silent audience to their unspoken words. Emma stood there, frozen, not sure of what had just happened. It had been a fleeting moment, a spontaneous act of defiance. She had kissed him to escape, to shake off the pressure of her family's expectations, to escape the suffocating life that was slowly strangling her. But now, as the silence stretched out between them, she realized the depth of what had just occurred. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a declaration, a rebellion, a bold decision she hadn't expected to make. Maxwell blinked first, a glimmer of amusement crossing his features as he took a small step back. "Well, that was unexpected," he said, his voice low but steady. His smile was not mocking, but rather curious, almost like he was trying to figure her out. Emma's heart fluttered nervously, but she refused to let it show. She tilted her head, trying to regain some semblance of composure, but it wasn't easy. She had just kissed a man she barely knew yet somehow. In that fleeting moment, it had felt more real, more honest than anything she had done in years. She couldn't help but feel that it was the one thing she'd done for herself in a long time, something that wasn't scripted, something that didn't come with expectations or obligations. I'm sorry," she murmured, feeling an unexpected wave of vulnerability. She wasn't sure if she was apologizing for the kiss or the vulnerability it had triggered. "I didn't mean," Maxwell cut her off with a soft chuckle, his voice smooth and unhurried. "You didn't mean it, or you didn't mean to do it." She stared at him, the words caught in her throat. Truth be told, she hadn't meant to kiss him at all, but the way his eyes looked at her, deep, penetrating, full of something she couldn't place, made her want to say that maybe, just maybe, she had meant it all along. But she didn't dare admit that to him, not yet. Maxwell gave her a knowing look, as though he could read her mind. "You're not exactly what I expected," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Not that I know what I expected, but this was a surprise." Emma swallowed hard, trying to gather her thoughts. The distance between them had shrunk to nothing, but it still felt like miles stretched between their realities. He was the CEO of one of the most successful companies in the tech industry, a man who had built his empire on his own, who played by his own rules. She was just Emma Fitzgerald, daughter of a powerful man, living in a world of carefully constructed facades, following a path that wasn't her own. And yet, in that moment, they were two people standing on the same rooftop, breathing the same air, caught in the same moment of vulnerability. "I'm sorry if I've made you uncomfortable," Emma said, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant. Maxwell's gaze softened, and he took another step closer, this time deliberately. "Uncomfortable? No. Surprised? Yes, but not in a bad way. In fact, I'd say intrigued. You're a woman who knows what she wants, but you're just not sure how to get it, are you?" Emma blinked at him, surprised by the directness of his words. He had a way of seeing right through her, cutting through the layers she had so carefully built up over the years. It was unsettling, but also strangely liberating. She had been living a life of constant expectation, constantly fulfilling the roles others had assigned to her. Yet here was this man, someone who had achieved everything on his own terms, asking her to question everything she thought she knew. "I don't know what I want," she admitted quietly, the words escaping her before she could stop them. "I thought I did, but maybe I don't anymore." Maxwell studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he nodded as though something had clicked in his mind. "You don't have to know right now. Sometimes the path becomes clearer once you stop trying so hard to figure it out." Emma felt a strange sense of peace wash over her at his words. It was almost as if he had been reading her mind, unraveling the knot of doubt and confusion she had been carrying with her for so long. For years she had lived in the shadow of others' expectations, forcing herself to follow a path she didn't choose. She had done everything by the book, never questioning whether it was truly her path. But in this moment, with Maxwell standing before her, it was as if the weight of those expectations began to lift. "You make it sound so simple," she replied, her voice tinged with wonder. Maxwell's smile deepened, but it wasn't a smile of triumph. It was a smile of someone who understood what it meant to fight against the world's expectations, someone who had built something real and meaningful on his own terms. "It's not simple," But sometimes the best things in life are the ones that find you when you stop trying so hard to find them. The night air around them seemed to grow colder, but Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. There was something about Maxwell that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could begin to find herself again. She didn't know what the future held or where this unexpected connection would lead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something inside her stir, something real. "I guess I should go back in," Emma said after a long pause, her voice soft. "They'll be wondering where I've gone." Maxwell nodded, stepping back to give her space. "Don't let them rush you. You've got time, Emma. You've got time to figure it out." As she turned to walk back toward the door, she glanced over her shoulder at him one last time. His presence had left an imprint on her, like a shadow that wouldn't fade. She wasn't sure what had just happened between them, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life had just been altered in a way she hadn't expected. And for the first time in years, Emma felt the spark of possibility. The days that followed the kiss felt surreal to Emma. She had gone back to her life, to the same structured, expected routine that she had known for years. But somehow, everything felt different now. The world around her seemed more vivid, more real, as though the kiss had opened her eyes to a new dimension of life, one where she had a choice. She could feel it in every interaction, every conversation. Her mind kept drifting back to that moment on the terrace with Maxwell, the warmth of his presence still lingering like an ember inside her. She hadn't expected to see him again so soon. The kiss had been impulsive, a fleeting moment of rebellion. She had convinced herself that it would fade into the background of her life, just another chaotic decision she had made under pressure. But when Maxwell reached out to her a few days later, offering her an opportunity she hadn't expected, the path she had been walking suddenly felt less certain. "Emma, I've been thinking." Maxwell's voice had come through her phone, casual yet determined. "I have a new project launching in a few weeks, and I need someone to head up the marketing. I think you're the right person for the job." Emma had been taken aback. She hadn't expected Maxwell, a man of such stature, to offer her something so direct, so significant. But as the words sank in, she felt a spark of excitement. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had been waiting for. Not to be the wife of a businessman, not to play a supporting role in someone else's life, but to take control of her own narrative, to forge her own career path. But there was something else in his voice, something that wasn't just about the job. His invitation wasn't just professional, it felt personal. Emma could hear the unspoken question hanging in the air between them. "Do you want this? Do you want more?" Still, she hesitated. She had been trained for a lifetime to play a role, to take the safe path, to align herself with Richard Hawkins, as her father wished. But Maxwell's proposition was something new, something uncertain. It wasn't the path she had been told to follow. It was a chance to be who she truly was. And so Emma found herself in Maxwell's office a week later, sitting across from him in a sleek, minimalist space that spoke volumes of his taste and power. His company, Night Technologies, was a reflection of him, sharp, innovative, forward-thinking. The walls were adorned with high-tech artwork and sleek furniture that had been designed with the intention of sparking creativity. Maxwell's own presence filled the room, magnetic and commanding, as though he didn't just run a company, he embodied the company itself. Maxwell sat at the head of the table, his posture relaxed but purposeful, his eyes focused intently on Emma as she settled into the chair opposite him. She couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and nervousness. This was a man who had achieved so much in his life, a man who had built an empire. And here she was, an outsider, unsure of what this opportunity meant for her. "So, tell me more about this project," Emma said, trying to sound composed, but her voice betrayed a slight tremor. Maxwell's lips quirked into a small smile. "Well, it's a new initiative we're launching to bridge the gap between our tech solutions and the non-profit sector. There's a lot of potential in this market, and I think with the right marketing, we can create something that's not just profitable, but truly impactful. I need someone who can think outside the box, who isn't afraid to push boundaries. Someone like you." Emma's heart raced. His words were flattering, but it was the way he said them that made her feel seen, made her feel like her skills and potential actually mattered. He wasn't just offering her a job, he was offering her a challenge, an opportunity to prove herself in a way she hadn't had the chance to before. "That sounds amazing," Emma replied, the excitement bubbling up inside her despite her attempts to stay calm. "But why me? There are so many talented people in this field. Why offer me this position?" Maxwell leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, his gaze never leaving her. "Because, Emma, I can see that you're more than just a corporate figurehead. You're someone who isn't afraid to question the status quo, someone who's willing to take risks. That's the kind of mindset we need." She looked into his eyes, searching for the sincerity she hoped to find, and what she saw there made her heart flutter something deeper than just professional admiration. There was a flicker of something personal in his gaze, something that made her wonder if this offer was not just about the job, but about something else. But before she could say anything more, he broke the silence, his tone shifting to something more casual, but with a hint of playfulness. "Besides," he added with a grin, "I don't think Richard Hawkins would have the vision for this project. He's too busy chasing corporate expansion, trying to increase his profits. This," he motioned to the sleek design of the room, the glass walls that offered a view of the city. "This is the future. This is where things are headed, and I want someone who can see that." Emma's pulse quickened at the mention of Richard's name. She had always known that Richard and her father's vision for the future were old-fashioned, rooted in the past. They played it safe, invested in what they knew, and built their empires through calculated moves. But Maxwell's vision was different. It was about the future, it was about progress, and it spoke to something deep within her, a desire to break free from the constraints that had been placed on her for so long. "I want to do this," Emma said, her voice more confident now, the decision finally settling within her. "I want to be a part of this project." Maxwell's smile deepened, satisfaction radiating from him. "Good. I think you'll be a great fit, but don't expect it to be easy. I push people hard here. If you're going to take this on, you'll have to give everything you've got." "I'm ready for that," Emma replied, the words coming without hesitation. She wasn't just ready for the challenge, she was hungry for it. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was standing on the edge of something new, something real. She was finally starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had the power to shape her own future. Maxwell stood up, walking over to the glass wall and looking out at the city below. "You're going to be a key part of this, Emma. I'm not just looking for a marketer. I need someone who believes in what we're building here." She stood as well, walking toward him, unsure of where this conversation would lead, but knowing that the path ahead was different from anything she had ever known. Maxwell turned to face her, and in that moment there was something unspoken in the air between them, a sense of possibility, of two people standing on the brink of something new. "Thank you for believing in me," Emma said softly, her voice almost a whisper. Maxwell's smile was steady, warm, and full of unspoken promise. "The real question is, Emma, do you believe in yourself?" Her answer was simple, clear. "I'm starting to." As they stood there in that moment of quiet understanding, Emma felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just taking a job. She was stepping into a new life, one where she would be challenged, pushed to her limits, and forced to confront the truths about herself that she had long ignored. And with Maxwell at her side, she wasn't sure where this path would take her, but for the first time, she was eager to find out. The weeks following Emma's acceptance of Maxwell's offer passed in a blur of late nights, endless meetings, and rapid adjustments. Night Technologies was everything she had imagined and more. The pace was relentless, the pressure intense, but the work was exciting. Maxwell had made it clear from the start that he wasn't looking for just another cog in the machine. He wanted people who could challenge the status quo, think differently, and drive innovation. But as Emma threw herself into the work, she began to realize just how much of an uphill battle it truly was. The world of tech was cutthroat. Every decision was a gamble, every move a potential risk. Night Technologies had its fingers in everything from cybersecurity to artificial intelligence, and now they were venturing into social good, launching a project that would connect their cutting-edge tech with non-profit organizations. It was a huge opportunity, but it also meant taking on an industry that was deeply entrenched in traditional ways of thinking. In many ways, it reminded Emma of the world she had just left behind, the world of wealth and influence, where every decision had consequences and every alliance could be a calculated play. But in the tech world, there was something different. Here, people weren't just after power, they were after change, after innovation, and sometimes that required walking a fine line between ethical considerations and business opportunities. It didn't take long before Emma encountered the darker side of this fast-paced world. One afternoon she was reviewing campaign strategies in her office when she received an unexpected visitor, Isabella Knight, Maxwell's ex-wife. Isabella was a striking woman in her late 30s, tall, elegant, and impeccably put together, her aura of sophistication commanding attention the moment she entered the room. Emma had heard about her, everyone had. Isabella was known in New York's social circles for her beauty, her poise, and her former role as the wife of the tech mogul. But there was something about her presence that made Emma uneasy, something that hinted at the complexity of their past. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Isabella said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, sitting down uninvited across from Emma. Emma offered a polite smile. "No, not at all. How can I help you?" Isabella's eyes gleamed, her voice dripping with subtle tension. "I'm sure Maxwell has told you about me," she continued, her gaze sharp, almost calculating. "I just wanted to drop by and see how things were going. I'm sure it's an exciting time for the company." Emma's stomach tightened. She had been warned that Isabella was a presence to be reckoned with in Maxwell's life, both professionally and personally. She had assumed their divorce was amicable, but the way Isabella was speaking almost possessively suggested there were still unresolved dynamics between them. "It's been a learning experience," Emma replied cautiously, shifting in her seat. "We've got some exciting projects in the works." Isabella tilted her head, studying Emma with an almost unsettling intensity. "You know," she began, her voice softening, "Maxwell can be quite the visionary. But don't be fooled by that charm. He has a way of getting people to believe in things that may not always be what they seem." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She was taken aback by the insinuation. "What do you mean by that?" Isabella leaned in slightly, her voice lowering. "Maxwell's business practices, they aren't as clean as everyone thinks. He's made some deals that could come back to haunt him. I just wanted to make sure you knew what you're getting into. It's easy to get caught up in the shine of his company, but the underbelly of his world isn't as glamorous as you might think." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Emma's mind raced. She had seen Maxwell's integrity, his drive to make a difference. But could Isabella be right? Was there a darker side to him, a side he had hidden from her? "Isabella, I appreciate your concern, but I'm here to do my job." "I'm here to work," Emma said, her voice steady despite the growing unease within her. Isabella's lips curled into a thin smile. "Of course, I'm sure you're doing great work, but just remember, things aren't always as they seem in this business. You'll learn that soon enough." As Isabella stood up to leave, she paused and looked back at Emma. "Good luck, Emma. You'll need it." The encounter with Isabella left Emma shaken. She spent the rest of the day replaying their conversation in her mind, the seeds of doubt slowly growing in the back of her thoughts. Was Isabella trying to manipulate her, or was there truth to her words? She knew Maxwell had built his empire through hard work and ambition, but Isabella's insinuations about his business practices couldn't be ignored. As the days passed, Emma began to notice small things that didn't sit right. There were moments in meetings when Maxwell's tone would shift, when he seemed too focused on the bottom line, too eager to close deals with people whose motives didn't seem as clear-cut as his public image suggested. Emma had always believed in transparency and honesty, but she began to wonder if Maxwell's methods were as clean as she had first assumed. The deeper she delved into the company's operations, the more she uncovered. There were whispers about shady deals with high-profile investors, rumors about under-the-table arrangements that, while not illegal, didn't sit well with her moral compass. As Emma worked late into the nights, reviewing reports and strategizing for the next phase of the project, the question lingered in the back of her mind: could she really continue to work with someone who might not be as ethical as he appeared? But despite the doubts swirling inside her, Emma couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward Maxwell. There was something about him that drew her in, something genuine, something real. She had seen his passion, his drive to change the world with his company, and in those moments it felt as though they were on the same path. Yet now she wondered if their paths were destined to diverge, if her own values would ultimately clash with his. One late evening, after another exhausting round of meetings, Maxwell invited Emma to his office to discuss the progress of their current project. She walked into his space, feeling the weight of the day on her shoulders, but also a strange sense of anticipation. He stood at the window, looking out at the glowing skyline, his back to her. There was something in his posture that told her he was deep in thought. "Emma," he said, turning around as she entered. His voice was calm, steady, but there was an edge to it that Emma hadn't heard before. "We're at a critical point with the project. The next few moves will define the direction we go in, and I need your input. You're an integral part of this now." She nodded, feeling a sense of pride, but also the weight of his expectations pressing down on her. "I've been thinking a lot about the strategy," she began, carefully choosing her words. "But there's something I've been hearing around the office. Rumors about some of the company's dealings. I just wanted to ask you about it." Maxwell's eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite place. Surprise, perhaps, or even wariness. "Rumors," he repeated. His voice had softened, but there was a sharpness beneath it. "I'm not sure what you've been hearing, but I can assure you everything I've done here has been with the best intentions. My focus is always on the long-term vision." Emma hesitated, her gaze never leaving his. "But sometimes the cost of that vision isn't always as clear as it seems. Are we compromising our integrity for the sake of success?" Maxwell's face tightened for a moment before he took a deep breath and walked toward her. "I'm not here to play games, Emma. You know that, but sometimes the right thing is also the hardest thing. We can't change the world by following the same rules everyone else does. I've had to make tough choices." Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. It wasn't the first time he had said something that made her question his approach, but this felt different. For the first time, she wondered if Maxwell's vision of success was clouded by his willingness to do whatever it took to achieve it. "I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes it's easy to lose sight of why you're doing it in the first place." Maxwell's eyes softened for a brief moment, his gaze lingering on hers. "I know you're right," he said quietly, "but this is bigger than any one of us." Emma nodded, but her heart felt heavier than ever. She didn't know what to believe anymore. What she knew for certain was that the world she had entered wasn't as simple as she had once thought. It was a world full of ambition, power, and hidden agendas. And as much as she believed in Maxwell's vision, she had to wonder if that vision was worth the cost. The following weeks in the office seemed to stretch on endlessly, each day a battle of balancing ambition with self-doubt. Maxwell's company was moving faster than Emma had anticipated. She had been swept into his world, where every decision felt pivotal and every action a reflection of their collective ambition. There was no time to question the methods. There was no space to wonder about the costs. But despite the outward success, Emma's world began to crack under the pressure. It started subtly, with minor shifts in Maxwell's behavior. He became more distant, his eyes often clouded with the weight of some unspoken worry. The passionate fire that had initially driven him seemed to flicker, fading behind layers of concern that he tried unsuccessfully to mask. His meetings with investors became longer, and when he did speak to Emma, his tone was clipped, almost as if he were holding back something. The man who had once been so open, so forthcoming with his thoughts, now seemed like a stranger. Emma told herself that she was just being paranoid. He had a lot on his plate. The company's expansion was no small feat. The new project was making waves, but it was also stirring up trouble. There were competitors, leaks, and whisperings of scandal that threatened the delicate balance Maxwell had fought so hard to maintain. But none of this explained the way he had been pulling away from her, the way his gaze would occasionally linger on her, filled with a quiet sadness she couldn't quite decipher. Then, one late afternoon, it all came to a head. Emma was sitting in her office, staring blankly at her computer screen, her mind lost in a sea of emails and reports, when she received an unexpected call from Maxwell. His voice on the other end of the line was tight, and there was a palpable tension in his words. "Emma, I need to talk to you. Can you come to my office now?" There was a chill in his tone that sent a ripple of unease through her. She stood up immediately, the weight of the conversation hanging heavy in the air. Maxwell had never asked for her presence like this. He had always been respectful of her space, giving her room to grow, to make her own decisions. As she walked toward his office, the corridor felt longer than usual. Her steps echoed, a rhythmic sound that seemed to intensify the dread building in her chest. When she reached his door, she knocked twice before entering. Maxwell was standing by the window, looking out at the skyline, his back turned to her. His posture was stiff, as if he were bracing himself for something. "Maxwell?" Emma's voice was soft, tentative. She wasn't sure what to expect. He didn't turn around immediately. Instead, there was a long pause before he finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "I've made a mistake, Emma. I should have told you sooner." Her heart skipped a beat. The weight of his words hit her like a wave, but she couldn't process it all. "What do you mean? What's going on?" she asked, taking a step closer to him. Maxwell turned slowly, and when their eyes met, she saw it, the sorrow in his gaze, the regret. "I've been hiding things from you, things that you should have known from the beginning. I've been caught up in so many deals, so many alliances, and I let myself believe that they were all for the greater good. But I've been fooling myself." Emma's stomach twisted. She had feared this moment for weeks, the slow unraveling of the man she had come to admire. But hearing it from his own lips, hearing him admit that he had been living in a world of half-truths and compromises, struck her with a force she couldn't have prepared for. "What kind of deals?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her attempt to stay composed. Maxwell took a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair. "There's been a lot of pressure, Emma. To grow faster, to push harder, to do whatever it takes to stay ahead. I made choices, compromises that I'm not proud of, and now I'm paying the price for it." Emma's mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Was this why he had seemed so distant? Why he had been acting differently? "Are you saying that everything we've worked on together, all of it, has been built on lies?" "No," Maxwell replied quickly, his voice more forceful now. "I didn't lie to you, but I didn't tell you the full truth either. There are things happening with Night Technologies, with the investors, with the acquisitions that you should have known. And now, I've made things worse." Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. "What have you done?" Maxwell turned away again, his gaze falling to the city below. He exhaled deeply, like a man who had been holding his breath for far too long. "I've been working with people whose motivations aren't as clear as mine. People who want to control the direction of the company for their own gain. There are rumors about shady financial dealings, about acquisitions that aren't as transparent as they should be. I've let it go too far." Emma stood frozen, her mind struggling to catch up with the revelation. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every part of her wanted to lash out, to demand that he explain himself further, but she was terrified of what she might hear. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to believe that the man she had grown to respect, even care for, had been operating in a world filled with dishonesty and manipulation. "So what now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What happens to the project? What happens to the company?" Maxwell shook his head, his face etched with frustration. I don't know, Emma. I'm not sure what I can fix anymore. I've lost control. And now you're caught in the middle of it. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Emma felt a wave of nausea rise in her chest. She had stepped into this world hoping to find a place for herself, to build something real, something meaningful. But now it seemed like it was all a facade, a carefully constructed web of lies that had begun to unravel in front of her. Her mind raced, but her body was numb. How could she trust him after this? How could she continue to work for someone who had hidden so much from her? She had given him her trust, her loyalty, and in return, he had given her nothing but the cold truth of a man who had been playing a dangerous game. That night, Emma didn't sleep. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, spinning in circles, clashing against each other. She had always known that the world of business was fraught with moral compromises. But this felt different. She had trusted Maxwell, had let herself believe in the possibility of something greater, something more than just profit and power. But now it seemed like she had been living in a dream. The next morning, she walked into the office, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She knew that things couldn't go back to the way they were. Maxwell's actions had opened a door, one that couldn't be closed again. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she knew that the road ahead would require a choice that could change everything. The morning after Maxwell's confession, Emma stood before the mirror in her apartment, staring at her reflection with a mixture of disbelief and quiet determination. The weight of the decisions before her felt suffocating, and she couldn't escape the questions swirling in her mind. Could she continue working for Maxwell after everything she had learned? Could she trust someone who had kept so much hidden, even if his intentions were good? And more importantly, could she forgive him for the way he had let her walk into this mess unprepared? She had spent the night agonizing over those questions, but as the sun began to rise over the skyline of New York, something shifted inside her. Emma knew one thing for certain: she couldn't live in the shadows of doubt forever. She had to make a decision, not just for her future, but for her own peace of mind. By the time she arrived at the office, her mind was made up. She would confront Maxwell. She would demand the truth, the full truth, no more half explanations or vague promises. She needed clarity, and she wasn't going to settle for anything less. When she stepped off the elevator into the sleek glass and steel building of Knight Technologies, she was struck by the familiar sight of the polished floors, the sleek lines of the modern architecture. Everything around her seemed so immaculately perfect, so meticulously designed. It felt like a world built on ideals that she had once believed in, ideals of progress, of changing the world through innovation. But now, standing in the heart of this world, Emma realized that the ideals of progress had to be grounded in something real, something that wasn't just about the bottom line, something that had to come from a place of honesty and integrity. If she was going to be a part of this world, she had to be true to herself. Maxwell was in his office when she arrived, as expected. His door was slightly ajar, and she could see him sitting at his desk, reviewing papers that no longer mattered. He looked up as she entered, his face weary, but his eyes still held that familiar intensity. The same intensity that had drawn her to him from the very beginning. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've been expecting you." "Maxwell," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart beat faster than she'd like to admit. "We need to talk." Maxwell's brow furrowed slightly, but he nodded. "I know. I owe you more than just an explanation." She took a deep breath and walked into the room, closing the door behind her. The space between them felt charged now, heavy with the unspoken words that hung in the air. "I can't pretend that I'm okay with what I learned last night," Emma said, her voice calm but firm. "You've been hiding things from me, things that could have changed everything about how I viewed this company, about how I viewed you." Maxwell stood up, his hands resting on the edge of his desk. "I never wanted to deceive you, Emma. Not you. I wanted you to see the company for what it could be, not for the mess it's become." Then, Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me with the truth?" Emma's voice cracked slightly, but she held it together. She needed him to understand the weight of the lies he had kept from her. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes filled with regret. "I thought I could fix it before it reached you. I didn't want you to be dragged into this, not like this." Emma stood tall, refusing to back down. "But I am in this, Maxwell. I've been in this from the moment I said yes to your offer. I've given everything to this company, to you, and I deserve the truth. I deserve to know if the foundation we're building is solid, or if it's built on compromises that could destroy everything we've worked for." Maxwell's gaze softened, his features tightening with emotion. He took a step toward her, closing the distance between them. "I can't undo the past, Emma, but I can promise you this. I will fix what's broken. I will make it right. I want you to be a part of that future, the real future." "I can't do this without you." Emma's heart fluttered, but the doubt still lingered. "You can't just erase everything that's happened. You can't just expect me to forget what I've learned." "No, I don't expect you to forget. But I need you to see the bigger picture," Maxwell said, his voice filled with urgency. "I know I've made mistakes, but this company, this vision, it's bigger than both of us, and I need you by my side to help me fix it. Together, we can make this right." Emma's mind raced, but as she looked into Maxwell's eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. Not just the vulnerability of a man admitting his mistakes, but the vulnerability of someone who had come to realize that without integrity, nothing else mattered. The company could succeed, it could grow, but if it didn't do so on a foundation of truth and honesty, it would crumble eventually. Her heart felt heavy, but something inside her told her that this was where she had to make her stand, not just for herself, but for the company she had invested so much in. "I'm not walking away from this, Maxwell," she said slowly, her voice steady. "But I need to know that we're building this on a foundation that's real. If you're willing to make those changes, if you're willing to take the steps necessary to make this company truly ethical, then I'll stay. I'll help you, but only if we do this the right way." Maxwell's face softened, his eyes filling with gratitude. "I swear to you, Emma, I'll do whatever it takes. We'll fix this, together." The next few months were not easy. There were tough decisions to be made, countless meetings with investors and legal teams, and a complete overhaul of some of the company's deals. But slowly, things began to change. Maxwell's vision of innovation and social impact started to take shape in a way that felt authentic, real. The shady dealings were exposed and contracts were restructured. Transparency became the cornerstone of their new approach. Emma stood by Maxwell every step of the way, not because she had to, but because she believed in the change they were creating. Together, they forged a new path for Night Technologies, one grounded in honesty, integrity, and a shared vision for the future. Months later, standing in front of a crowd at the company's first public launch event of their new initiative, Emma stood beside Maxwell, her heart swelling with pride. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, the atmosphere electric with the promise of something new. As Maxwell took the stage to speak, he looked over at Emma, his gaze filled with quiet appreciation. "I couldn't have done this without you, Emma," he said softly, his words only for her. "You're the one who reminded me why we're here in the first place. You gave me the courage to make things right." Emma smiled, her heart full. This wasn't just about the success of a company. It was about the success of their journey together, the journey of honesty, redemption, and the power of doing things the right way. And as Maxwell spoke to the crowd, Emma knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The road wasn't easy, but it was real, and it was theirs. As Emma stands at the crossroads of a life-altering decision, the truth has finally been laid bare. The man she thought she knew, Maxwell Knight, has shown her a side of himself she never expected. But now, standing together, they must decide whether they can rebuild not just a company, but their trust in each other. The future is uncertain, and the stakes have never been higher. But through the trials, the betrayals, and the tough choices, Emma finds something she never thought she'd have, the courage to choose her own path, and the strength to embrace a future she's finally ready to shape. Will Maxwell's redemption be enough to win her heart and her loyalty? Can they truly build a new foundation for night technologies based on honesty and integrity? Or will the weight of their past mistakes pull them back into the darkness? The final chapter is yet to be written, and Emma's journey is far from over. If you want to see how it all unfolds, how love, trust and ambition collide in a world of high stakes, be sure to subscribe and join me for the next chapter. You won't want to miss what happens next. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care.